So today we're kicking off the inside of this house. We're going through everything, not just the inside, but the outside too, the game plan. Now, thank you everyone for such kind comments last week, specifically around the lack of a script. I didn't use scripts in order to necessarily stage anything because it was all true. It was just to control the narrative, right? Because with the old houses, with the manor, that was 6 years ago already, almost 7 years ago. I didn't want to discuss things like, let's say, the kitchen and forget something, because coming back 2 weeks after posting a video about that, how do you bring it up again naturally? You can't. So the side effect of not using a script last week was that I had my order of events wrong for what this week's video was going to be. This week's video originally was supposed to be the history of the estate, what the house went through over time, how it changed, but I said it was going to be the game plan this week. Now that's okay because the history and the game plan do work very nicely together, so we're just gonna merge them. And because we're merging them, this may end up being a 2-part episode, but since I'm just now sitting down to film this, we'll see what we can do, and we'll see what I can cleverly edit. Probably 2 parts because I don't want to skip anything. The house doesn't deserve that, and we have the benefit of time because, like I said last week, we're living in the project now. Today what we're going to do is go through every single room of the house, first floor, second floor, basement, and then outside. You're not really going to see any after shots at all today. And that's not because I'm leaving it for some grand reveal. Most of you have already seen the Christmas videos or the Halloween videos. You know the general idea of what the house looks like inside and a little bit of what it looks like outside. And last week I showed a few listing photos, but today is really going to be what those listing photos actually were, as well as the pictures I took the day that I bought the house. And I'm going to talk about the condition it was in, going to talk about everything that needed to happen or would happen or that I wanted to happen in each room. As we're rolling along in this, I will point out and share what the house used to be. And I found this out through a member of the family that used to live here. Another important thing to mention before anything starts, when I got this house, when I won this house, my design aesthetic had changed over the years. With the manor, I used the term that Pottery Barn had, which was rustic modern. I liked some pieces that looked old, I liked some new. I would inject a lot of, touches of mid-century, I guess you could say, because I liked just the overall combination of how it looked. When I moved into the ranch, I thought I could embrace mid-century completely, but ultimately I could not. It was not an aesthetic that I really liked. So as time went on, I started to realize that my design aesthetic that I gravitate toward, that I really like the most, is referred to as dark academia. Now, dark academia, it might be a new term to some people, and some of you might be very familiar with it, and that's great if you are, and that's fine if you're not. I find what I've encountered over the years since I discovered this design aesthetic is that people can be real shits about it. Some people see what you do as dark academia and feel the need to be like, that's not dark academia, this is, or that looks like this. And dark academia, at its core, you have academia, so literature, books. I love books, I love to read, I love to write. I have old books throughout the house, that's the vibe. So it is kind of an academic, knowledge-based way of decorating. When you're putting books out, you're putting things that seem studious out. Where the dark comes into play is a little bit of a gothic sense, or literally darker colors, moody, atmospheric. I think that dark academia is something that is open to interpretation of whatever you want to make it for yourself. It sort of needs to fall in line with a general vibe, which is moody and darker. To say that any one person's version is wrong, I don't think is fair. I think dark academia incorporates quirky design aesthetic, interesting little things that you find and see in a space. And in my house, each room ultimately will have its own theme. Some are well on their way with it now. Others are working on it. In the kitchen, you saw in the Christmas and Halloween videos, I have ghosts in here. And in the parlor, you haven't seen this, but the theme is bees. The study is animals. The green bathroom is hearts. The living room is plants. As we move through this series and you get to learn the estate and you get to see how I did my design, none of it's there entirely yet. Decorating and designing a space is expensive. You start with your paint, but adding the accessories and the finishing details and all that, it's expensive. And this was a big leap from where I had been to where I want to go. And it's gonna take time. So as we're watching and learning and developing with each other, everything was done with intention and purpose. And some things I had to revisit on that intention and purpose and kind of redo because it just wasn't what it should have been and could be better. Interior design is like fashion. What you thought was super great 20 years ago, so for me, fresh out of high school, the most extreme bootcut jeans possible. I wanted them to look like they were flares. I thought that was the coolest thing. I could not imagine not having a skinny jean now or just a straight leg. I don't own any bootcut jeans. Interior design choices change, your design aesthetic changes. I feel like dark academia is gonna be mine for a very, very long time, but it hasn't always been. So just bear with me as things progress and change and get to where they need to be, because eventually they'll be there. So in a very high level overview, the estate was built in 1893. We think it might have been 1903, but it was definitely sometime between that. The house did have the same ownership for the first 50 to 60 years. In that time, the front porch was enclosed, probably in the 30s or 40s, with all of the windows on it. And then there was a second floor addition added to the back of the house above the kitchen. This also being where they added a stairwell that went out to the driveway, converting the second floor into an apartment. Now, my previous owners, they bought the house in 1952, and in the mid-60s did their first major renovation. We have proof of the renovation because of the permits that were pulled for it, which I don't remember what the amount was at the time, but today it would equate to like $80,000 of work done. And this is also proven by the duct work in the basement with the dates printed on it. In the 60s, the house was retrofitted to have central air. All of the wiring was converted from knob and tube to the updated like cloth covered wire. They added the basement stairs at that point, a bedroom in the basement, and then I believe marginally converted the second floor, which was entirely an apartment when they bought it, and made it more into a first and second floor living space. After that 60s renovation, nothing happened in the house until 1983 when there was a fire on Christmas Eve night or going into Christmas Day. And I'll talk more about the fire later, but that fire ended up burning out the entire second floor of the house, which meant that when it was rebuilt, it changed the layout entirely upstairs, as well as this addition you see behind me, which is from the 80s because they dug a new basement, added onto the kitchen, and added a laundry room. From that, the house remained essentially untouched until I bought it and did all the things. So when I bought the estate, I made it very clear via my realtor that I wanted to meet with one or several surviving members of the family so that I could get the history of the house. None of them were interested in doing that. I have my own opinions about that situation, considering I think 5 of the 6 surviving kids live immediately in the vicinity. But I get it. I understand. The unfortunate thing is that so many questions that I have about the house could be answered. They just won't be. And that's very unfortunate. The day I bought the house, when I got here, I went to turn the water on and the water wasn't working. So I called my realtor, Brenda, and I was like, hey, WTF? And one of the sons came out to be like, well, my dad had kind of jerry-rigged all these things in the basement. So this is where this water shutoff is. And they were all kind of hidden in weird spots. The plumbing is a whole thing. But when he walked very quickly through the house with me, he was the one that shared that there had been a fire in the 80s, which I was like, oh, that's nice. Like, I knew nothing about it. There's no record of that. He got the water on. That was it. That was all I found out about the house. February of 2024, I had a letter in my mailbox from one of the daughters, and she wanted to come and look at the house with me. I sent her a text message and I said, yes, I'd love to walk the house with you, but I need to forewarn you, it looks very different from when your grandparents owned it. And I wanted to be sensitive to that because this was a childhood home. This is someone who was born into this house. And I didn't want her to come in and be like, you changed everything, because I did. And that can be upsetting to some people. But she said, nope, that's why I waited a year. I'm very excited to see it. So she came in and we toured the house. So when I get to the end of each section of this video, I will share with you what she shared with me. We're gonna start right here in the kitchen with what it was, and then we're gonna move through the house. So I'm gonna do a split screen on this because one of the comments that I've seen come up a few times is that you guys wanna see the pictures a bit longer than they've been displayed. I don't display them for a ton of time just because I don't want to like make these videos unnecessarily long, but you know what? Today we've got the gift of time and I'm gonna do it. So split screen, you look at me, you look at the pictures, whatever the hell you want, I don't care. So coming into the kitchen, alrighty. Obviously the kitchen is dated. Looking at this photo, you can see a beam across the ceiling, and that beam is the original back wall of the house. So beyond that, where the ceiling is lower, is where they added on the addition. Now, if you were adding on an addition to your house nowadays, I imagine you would probably match the ceiling height. I have no idea why they didn't, but they didn't. That wood beam that you see there is a facade. It is not a solid beam. The linoleum floor, that was all added in the 80s after the fire, the carpeting, and then all of this cabinetry. And as we get into things here also, I mentioned last week, I painted original woodwork. I want you to pay attention, and I'm gonna point this shit out through the video, but I want you to pay attention to what the woodwork was in the house when I bought it. Specifically here in the kitchen. You can see there are there's three in this picture, but 3 original door frames. 2 of them had their doors in them still. That's lovely. When taking on a project such as this, you need to pick and choose your battles. I did not choose the battle of refinishing the original woodwork for a very specific reason. It is very seldomly occurring in this house. From this photo alone, you can see, yes, there's casework on the doors. The doors were missing the crown trim at the top of the door frame. None of the baseboards are original. The trim on the doors in the background, that's not original. Same with the window. That's all from the 80s. My goal with the house was to, for lack of a better word, replicate trim everywhere so that it all looked the same. If I was going to use real wood and not MDF as I did, that is very expensive. That is very time consuming. It's difficult to match the stain. Some of you are probably rolling your eyes at this right now, and that's okay. It wasn't one of the battles I wanted to fight. At a later point in time, could I go back and, refinish the doors that I painted? Absolutely. I can strip those. Maybe that's a video that I do later this year or next winter when I'm running out of things to do. It wasn't for right now, so keep that in mind. You can see the stove / oven / I don't think that was a microwave on top, but I can't remember now. I feel like it was a double oven, but that needed to be replaced. It worked still, truly it worked still, but the electrical in the wall was very old. The electrical in the house itself was it needed to be upgraded. So that was on the list of things to do. So that was gonna be replaced, but also the dishwasher was shot. That needed to be replaced. There was no refrigerator. The cabinetry, very 80s, the blue counter, all of that. Over the sink, those are the only 2 functional original windows in the house. Now, I love those windows. Something about them though, as I'm looking at them, those are being replaced this summer because I have tried weather stripping them. I've tried doing all sorts of stuff. The breeze that comes in through those windows, they are just not energy efficient, and they're gonna get recycled and used on the garage. So they'll still be on the property, but that needs to get replaced because it's bad. See where there's a microwave added in the wall. When we pulled it out, we found that it was powered by an extension cord that ran through the wall and was wired directly into, an electrical box in the basement. Super not safe. When we get to it, you'll see largely the kitchen retained its configuration. And this is something in hindsight where you look back 2 years later and you're like, I wish I'd done something a little bit different. At that end though, I didn't want an oven with a cooktop on top of it. I wanted them to be separate pieces because that's more of a modern kitchen. The exhaust, you can see it in this picture here on the left side. The exhaust was just this fan tucked into the wall that fed outside. Obviously I didn't want that. The exhaust is now right here next to me. Behind me, you can see just looking at these pictures right now, there's a big difference. That carpet needed to go, all the flooring in the kitchen needed to go. The counter went a bit far, and then there was this giant built-in hutch. I have no problem with built-in hutches. This is just a very dated design, and it cut into the kitchen in a way that I didn't want. You know, we'll cover this more in the later kitchen episodes. All the cabinetry was donated to this lovely man in Green Bay who was retired and starting his own woodworking business, and he took all of the cabinets. So I didn't just like destroy everything by any means. Behind that built-in, you can see a glimpse of a saloon door, and that is going into the laundry room, which we'll cover in a moment. And then in this kind of overall shot of the kitchen, you can just see there wasn't much in the way for lighting. There were 2 dome lights that needed to be replaced. There was the little chandelier that was in the ceiling, needed to go. Everything just needed to be modernized. What my spin on it would entail, apart from, we'll say 1.5 walls, the kitchen would be gutted to the studs. When they did the remodel in the 80s, they attached sheetrock directly to the plaster and lathe, which meant that all of that trim work was flush with the walls. I wanted the trim work to, you know, protrude from the walls as it's supposed to. That meant gutting everything to the studs. It meant rewiring the entire kitchen and upgrading the electrical, specifically like the cooktop, which is you know, what's that called? An induction cooktop. The electrical for the house couldn't support that, so that needed to be done. New ductwork. The ceiling on the higher part of the kitchen was torn out completely. Found some knob and tube, which was still routed into the 60s modernized wiring for the house, but had to take that out. Came up with a whole plan for the lighting in the kitchen, all new cabinets, new counters, new mechanicals, new sink, faucet, new flooring, a custom island that I built with my dad. I think that's it. And then of course, you know, new sheetrock outlets, texture, all that stuff. In the laundry room, I wanted the saloon doors gone. What that meant was narrowing that door opening by like 4 inches, I want to say, because I took one of the historic doors from the basement and brought it up here so that I could mount that and close the laundry room off when necessary. Removed the sink base, the counter, replaced the trim. It just needed to be fixed in there. Obviously the washer and dryer are very old. I didn't want that box mounted above it. There was also like a filing cabinet in there, another cabinet, those are gone. And then you can get a very brief glimpse in this photo of a blue cabinet onto the right. And that cabinet was actually the original kitchen cabinets from when the house was built. The original version of it, there is one in the basement still that still has the stain on it, which just matched the original woodwork. This one had been painted with like a light blue chalk paint inside and out. That is now here in the kitchen. It's been repainted. It'll probably get repainted again and the inside hasn't been fixed, but I do love that there is the original kitchen cabinetry still intact in the house. The laundry room now has new flooring, new mechanicals, new sink. Everything is new in there. So with one more quick glance at the kitchen, there are the 2 doors. The door in this photo that is closed, that leads down to the basement. Originally, that led straight out to the side of the house. It was just an exit for the house. The door that is open next to it when I bought the house was entirely a half bathroom, as seen in this photo. Now, this half bathroom was huge. It's about 5 feet wide, but that's like, I think 11.5 feet deep. That is a massive half bathroom to have off of your kitchen. Originally, I was just going to remodel that bathroom and let it exist the way it was. After I'd purchased the house and before I had done any work on it, I had whatever friends were in the area that wanted to, they could come and walk through the house with me just to see it in its untouched state. And in this room, my friends Tina and Amy had said like, well, you wouldn't want a half bathroom off the kitchen because, you know, people are doing their business in there and you're making a meal, like that's not great. One of them said, you know, just turn the whole thing into a pantry or close the whole thing off. And I was like, well, I don't want to lose a bathroom because I don't want to lower any kind of a value. But the pantry idea stuck, and ultimately this half bathroom would get divided in 2. So now when you go through that doorway, there is the pantry with a coffee bar in it, full size pantry, cabinets, and then another wall and a very small half bathroom with just a sink and the toilet. This room very much was gutted to the studs. Very much. The ceiling in this, when they had the fire in the 80s, they did not repair some of the fire damage in the ceiling. So when we took this ceiling out, which was about, I'd say 1.5 feet lower than the original ceiling, there was a bunch of charred debris coming out of it and, you know, good stuff like that. So once this was gutted to the studs, it was reconfigured, built the new wall, rewired everything, new plumbing, and then it was good to go. So before we move into the parlor, originally, this was actually a big back porch. It was not foundational by any means. It was just a big enclosed back porch. And I don't know if that was done in the 30s or 40s when the front porch got its work done to it. But she said that they would do their homework out here. There were ironing boards out here when they had to do the ironing for their mom. And there were like some space heaters and stuff. The reason the kitchen was built out this far was because the dad wanted a workshop in the basement. It needed to be dug down enough, so why not build on top of it? So that's why this addition is here. I'm very thankful that it is, because I'm very happy to have, you know, a washer and dryer that are at least on the ground level rather than in the basement. But that's it for this room. So moving on to the parlor. Right off the bat, obviously the carpet's not original to the house. Another thing that's not original is any of the baseboards. They look original, don't they? This is something where people get so bent out of shape about woodwork. Sometimes woodwork was added in at a different point in time and people just assume, oh, it's original. What we found as, and when I say we, I mean like my parents and I, baseboards where they meet in some areas, they're not the same. The crown changes at the top. This room obviously was retrofitted for heat. When we tore the carpet out, we found where the original registers were supposed to be. And the only trim that was original in this room is the casework around the windows, the casework around the double doors, and then the casework around the door that was coming into the kitchen. It's tough to tell when this room was adjusted, whether it was in the 60s or the 80s, because in the 80s, when they had the fire, this room was affected by it. Now you could see this kind of nook in the wall there. According to the daughter that visited me, that nook was originally a pocket door. And the opening that you see that goes into the living room, that was a solid wall. Because on the other side of that wall, it was the foyer. That changed at some point for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not gonna change it back because that would just kind of mess with the whole flow of the house, and maybe that's why they did it. I don't know. So in the corner in this picture, that left-hand corner, that was where there was a Franklin stove. And when we took the carpet up, you could see where it had existed on the floor there. That Franklin stove was the cause of the fire in the 80s. And I'll explain the entire fire once we get to the end of this stuff, because it's not gonna make sense if I just start now. Otherwise, I don't know if this was a dining room at some point, whatever, but the daughter shared that this was the mother's living room. So the mom had her living room, the dad had his living room, and they could watch their own stuff respectively. Off the parlor is technically the primary bedroom. I use it as my study. Now the reason this is the primary bedroom is because when I bought it, it had 2 closets in it, and it also has an ensuite bathroom. I didn't want my bedroom on the first floor, and I also have a king size bed, so this was not going to be conducive to holding that. So this room was entirely refitted in the 80s because of the fire and water damage, most likely from up above. So the whole room has sheetrock instead of plaster and lathe. Obviously all the baseboards, trim, everything needs to be replaced. In this room, you can also see that the doors for the closets are just those kind of 1980s hollow core doors. They are not original doors. Losing one of them, I didn't care. And the reason I lost one of them is because the ensuite bathroom. I call this the green bathroom because it's still green, but originally you can see the green cabinet in there. This bathroom was a disaster. This bathroom caused me a lot of tears. Directly on the other side of the wall is the half bath. Because that was all being gutted, this needed to be gutted. This bathroom also had a very bouncy floor in it, which once the carpet was pulled up, the floor was completely rotted. The joists for the floor, there was like a 4.5 inch angle from the outside of the house to the inner part, which went directly underneath the shower. Everything needed to be redone in this bathroom. Obviously, you know, that stuff is very old that you see, the sink, the toilet, none of it's original to the house. The shower base, it's like a foot bath where it's, you know, it might have been 11 inches deep in there where you could fill it with a few inches of water and put like a baby in it and do bath time stuff. I don't think I could stand up upright in that shower. I never tried. That shower was demolished very quickly after buying the house. But this bathroom, like the half bath, also had a lowered ceiling in it. So the ceiling needed to be raised, new insulation, new plumbing, new wiring, new shower. And adjacent to the shower, I wanted to take that closet from the primary bedroom and make it square footage for the bathroom to have storage, because behind the door in here, they had this big cabinet that just kind of ate up the corner, and that was where I wanted to put the sink. So moving out of those rooms, we're gonna go into the living room now. Now the living room, it's very big, it's lovely. You can see that whole wall of original woodwork, also lovely. The living room, a lot of changes. You're gonna find out in a couple weeks when I share the decorating video for spring what's gonna happen in the living room. Half of the room has original baseboards, half does not. The window casework is original, and that giant window in the living room is original to the house. I have two of them, there's one in the parlor as well. It's beveled glass, there's a giant storm window outside, it is beautiful. I will not get rid of those even though they are not energy efficient at all. I love those windows. The opening that goes into the parlor, to the right of it is a little shelving unit that they built in directly above where the heat comes out. When we pulled the carpet up, you could see there had been some sort of something that extended away from the wall where that heat register is. It was also mirrored on the other side of the living room. This was before we knew anything about what the layout of the house was originally, before any renovations made by the previous owners. So we could not figure it out, couldn't figure it out. Come to find out from this picture, you can see the opening into the parlor, that used to be a solid wall. To the right of it was pocket doors, but where that heat register comes out, that had been a wall. And that wall connected on the other side of the living room, and there were pocket doors there as well. So that was the front living room, which would probably be, I guess, you know, back in the day, that was probably the front parlor. Another thing to note, the wall with the little built-in nook, that entire wall, all the way to the edge, is a facade. It is not the original wall at all. That wall was built when they added central air. That is one of the projects for this summer, which we'll find out about. That wall is essentially hollow inside and will be changing. Front door is original. I love the front door. It's also not very energy efficient or insulated at all. And right now, looking out there, I can see a little bit of daylight. That's my fault, I can fix that, but I just haven't yet. The living room is the next big glow up in the house. That is a project for summertime when it's not cold outside, because it's going to involve removing everything to the studs on 3 walls and the ceiling. The ceiling is currently attached to the plaster and lathe. I want to incorporate electrical in it, so lighting. I need a ceiling fan in there. I know that ceiling fans aren't the most like beautiful thing in the world. This house has such poor circulation though for airflow that in the summertime it is stiflingly hot in there. I'm gonna add a ceiling fan. I'll zhuzh it up. You'll see that, you know, there are ways to do it where it's not, you know, your Chesapeake Bay ceiling fan with the fluted lights and stuff. There are ways to make it look good, but it's gonna be really cool. And I think in the end, the living room is going to be my favorite space. I already love the living room, but I think in the end, it's going to be my favorite space in the house because it's going to be very cool. And then finally, for the first floor is the stairwell. The stairwell, well, you might just think, well, what could you do to a stairwell? You do a lot. And if you've seen the Christmas video, you know that that angled ceiling is no longer there. The stairwell had been closed in the 60s. Inside that stairwell was the original wallpaper from when the house was built. And I thought, well, I'm taking this stupid thing out. The stairwell would have its ceiling completely torn out. I would add sconces. The entire thing is board and batten now. The main purpose in removing that ceiling was to expose the stained glass window that is in the second floor. That being said, thanks so much for watching part 1 of this video. There's a cat here, story of my life. Part 2 is available right now, where we're gonna talk about the second floor, how the fire actually happened, and what is gonna go on outside of the house. If you have any questions on anything that you saw in the video today, please don't hesitate to leave them below. I'm happy to answer them. And also make sure that you are subscribed so that you're reminded every Wednesday morning when a new episode drops, like next week when I share the decorate for spring video with me, followed the following week, or the next week by kicking off work with the kitchen. So until then, take care. Thanks so much. Love you. Bye.